Hi everyone, I'm jumping on here today solo, missing Emma here, who's actually in Bali, Birch. She's loving the sunshine and the cocktails in Bali. So you've got me for just this little intro here. We're just jumping in for an update on this exact case. So there's a few things to note here. When you get into the this case, we will call it episode 16. However, we have decided to bring this episode forward a week for you all because of the fact that there has been a massive update to this case. And so it's so current right now that we thought we would jump ahead and jump to this episode for episode 15. So this is now episode 15, not episode 16. So we're going to be talking about the Easey Street Murders in this episode. The update is that a man has been arrested for these murders back in 1977, so nearly 50 years ago. So this guy has been arrested in Rome. He would have been 17 at the time of the murders. He was, as Ronnie says, he was in the file. So this guy has been on their radar for quite some time. He was, on the night of the murders, was pulled by police with and carrying a knife. But because they didn't know about the murders at the time, the man was released. However, he was in the file. Police work wasn't great, as we'll get into in the case in this episode. But basically, in 2017, when they went to look at some DNA evidence linked to this case, this guy skipped the country. So he was a Greek and Australian national, so he was able to exit the country and go to Greece. Extradition laws in Greece aren't great in that we had to basically the murders had to have been within 7 years of wanting to extradite him. So the fact that there had been, I think at that point, 40 years already passed, there was no way we could extradite him from Greece. So the police have sat really quiet on this and waited. This guy has got the guts to move countries. He's, for some reason, on Thursday, the 19th of September, left Greece and flown to Rome, and this is where the police have nabbed him. So they've been able to arrest him in Rome. He is sitting there waiting extradition now. When that will happen, we don't know. The police are talking sort of in the next month. They'll look at how they can extradite him, and we'll be looking at a trial. So obviously this case will have more updates as we go. But for now, we can get the whole backstory of this case by listening to our episode coming up. So sit tight, listen to the episode. None of what's in this changes as such based on this information. All of what we've given is accurate information. It's still an unsolved case, clearly. However, we now have an arrest. So lots more to come. Stay tuned. Listen to this episode to get all the backstory. So I will hand you over to myself and Emma now to go into the case for episode 15, not 16. Thanks, guys. Stay curious, crime besties.
Welcome back to Crime Besties, to another episode of our delightful podcast.
Yes. We're
very demure.
Very demure. Yeah. Love it.
We've got to bring the TikTok sensations in there somehow.
Oh, I know. Like I probably spend a bit too much time on there now, and I'm like getting a little bit addicted. Is that?
Not only that, but you've discovered how to like make some really cool TikToks, and we're going to actually give it a go.
Here we come.
Who are we? This podcasting caper has changed us, Meg.
I've never thought I'd be like this. No.
We're all about the socials and about the likes and about the shares.
I haven't been on socials in years, and now I'm like, and the thing is, Facebook was always the thing whenever it was socials, and now like Facebook's dead.
Like, yeah, my beautiful, I've got a gorgeous much younger than me cousin. Mm-hmm. She's 22, and even back in the day, I'm talking years and years ago, she'd say to me, "Oh, Emma, Facebook, no, that's just for old people." So thanks, Layla, for keeping me current. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a learning curve, that's for sure.
It is a delightful one at that.
We'll play around with the trends on TikTok.
Totally. So go and check us out over there and follow us. We're at 2 Crime Besties.
We'll just embarrass the shit out of ourselves.
I think we're really good at doing that regardless.
Well, it's a daily occurrence. And usually involves my children.
Yes. Now, tell me how your week has been.
Yeah. No, it's been good. Work. Lots of fun. And, going pretty good. Yeah, we've got we've had a big week, actually. It's been an interesting one with just busy stuff and life and kids being sick and juggling the life that it is.
Yeah, there's always something, isn't there?
Oh,
It's never.
always.
I can't imagine a week where I haven't had to juggle something.
Oh, this is it. And it's always that last minute throw of like, what you thought was going to happen today ain't how this is going to fly. We're going to flip it all and just, go with it. And we work it out.
That's it. I think being adaptable is very much needed when you're a parent. You have no choice but to be.
Yeah. But that's why we need our weekends and do our lovely things that we do.
I was going to say.
How fun was our brunch? Was it a brunch?
Well,
what do you call that?
Okay, so you hear of bottomless brunches, but we kind of had a bottomless afternoon tea / early dinner.
A couple of us were talking about, do we call it Linner? It's a bottomless Linner.
It was delightful.
Yeah.
I had many a margarita. What were your drink of choice?
I was on the Aperol spritzers that were loaded with ice. So they were a little bit light on in the alcohol department. But I definitely had a bit of a headache the next day. So.
Yeah, so did I. I woke up feeling a little ginger, but it was lots of fun.
It was.
Bit of Mexican food to go with it.
The food was really good. I was impressed.
Me
Yeah.
too.
But the company was great.
That's
it was good fun.
Lots and lots of fun.
Yeah. It was funny because sitting there, I was looking around going, oh my God, this was the place where I would go. Not often as a young person, but when you're sitting there as an older person, like thinking, like going, "Oh yeah, I remember this place."
Yeah, but we were there at 4:00 in the afternoon. It wasn't like when we were leaving at 10 p.m.
Oh yeah,
or 9:30, whatever time we left. Which that was well and truly late enough for me.
And we weren't the last ones to leave by any means. There were people who were kicking on, which I love. When we were late, we were standing out the front waiting for our Uber, and someone else who was leaving as well, going, "I'm getting out of here," because the rest of our crew were inside. Doing ray gun moves on the dance floor.
Yeah, she saw it as he saw it as his cue to leave.
Cue to leave. Didn't want to do the bunny, the rabbit hop. No rabbit, it's a kangaroo. We're Australians, sorry. It's the kangaroo hop, the dance moves on the dance floor. They were pulling out some great break dance.
You've had a really good afternoon when you're doing ray gun moves on the dance floor at 9:30 p.m.
When you really shouldn't be legally allowed to do break dancing at all at our age.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what case are we talking about today?
So today we're doing one that is very local to us in that it's in Melbourne. We're talking about the Easey Street Murders. So this case was back in 1977, and actually, I guess to get a bit of a vibe of this case, my parents were literally, they're in this age bracket of these women who were murdered in Easey Street. They were probably a couple of years older than them maybe, and they had just arrived back in the country from their overseas travels and gallivanting around, those young people. So they just arrived back in Melbourne and were living not too far from where these murders occurred. And then I think when they did actually occur, they just moved out of that apartment and moved to where then I grew up in outer eastern suburbs. So, but it was I sort of thought, I'll run this past mum and dad and see if they remember this case. And it was a really interesting hearing them go, they knew about it. Because I think this is a vibe that runs over this case in general.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I think it's not actually solved. And so I immediately said to my mum and dad, do you remember the murders that happened in Easey Street? And my mum goes, oh, yes, the 2 prostitutes.
Oh.
Yeah. Which I was like, Mum, no.
No, that's not even close to the truth.
Close. I said, Mum, that's actually really why I think this case hasn't been solved.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the vibe that people gave this case when it wasn't the case at all. They were young women. I said to my mum, these were 2 girls who were very much like-minded of you, Mum. They were independent women who travelled overseas and were, women of their time who were probably a little bit before their time.
I feel like there was sort of maybe that first wave feminist sort of crowd.
Yeah.
2 women independently living on their own, I don't need no man, and making it for themselves. Their next door neighbours were in exactly the same boat. 2 single women living, professional women too, had careers for themselves, were going out having a great time, and enjoying life, and in amongst all that, meeting men, having relationships, or even like little dalliances. It wasn't. It just was what it was. There was nothing sinister about the way they were acting. Obviously, though, it's really interesting to hear that was your mum's take on it, because...
That is mum's kind of take on things. Patty.
I think Pat's had a mention in several episodes recently.
She'll love it.
I wonder whether, that has put a taint on the case for a lot of people, if that's the vibe that was given out at the time.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
But let's go back a little bit and we'll explain who these women were exactly. I mean, as we were just sort of explaining a little bit about who they were, but they were also known as the two Sues, which I just love.
Me too.
So they were Susan and Suzanne. So we have, now I'm going to get the names mixed around the wrong way.
Susan Bartlett.
Yes.
She was 27 at the time of the murders, and then 28-year-old Suzanne Armstrong. And as you said, they were collectively known as the two Suses, which is cute.
Yeah.
They grew up in Benalla, so in country Victoria, and they became friends, I think, in primary school.
I think they met first 14 or something was what
so
I think
it would have been high
that's
school
what I
then.
saw. But it might have been earlier than that even. It could be. Yeah.
And they shared a lot of common interests. They loved music and bands and lots of different things.
Yeah.
And they also had a mutual love for travel. And
the Beatles.
And the Beatles. And they went on an overseas trip together. And by all accounts, I feel like if you go overseas with somebody, that either makes or breaks a relationship, a friendship.
100%, yeah.
And the fact that they've gone overseas together, survived it, thrived, their friendship thrived through that.
Yeah.
That's a testament to just how good of friends they were.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Yeah.
But in those travels, now I'm going to get it wrong. It's Suzanne Armstrong.
Suzanne Armstrong, yep.
So she met a Greek man in Athens in Greece, and they fell in love. They were very, very besotted with each other, which is, holiday romance. That's so lovely. And she did end up falling pregnant. So he had every intention of marrying her, but because of being from different countries, that wasn't as simple as straightforward as maybe it would be today. I don't know how easy that would be or not in that situation. But everything was going well. But so they had the baby, but weren't able to get married for whatever reason. Susan decided that she wanted to go back to Australia, but to do that, she kind of did that a little bit sneakily, I guess, because she felt like it wasn't going to be an ideal situation, that the father of the baby maybe would not want her to do that. So she did tell him that she was going back to Australia to visit family and introduce her baby to the rest of her family. I believe her parents had come over and visited them when she first had the baby.
Yes.
But at about 3 months of age, she was like, no, I'm homesick, want to go home. So she took the baby back to Australia on the pretense that she was definitely coming back to Greece, and that was her intention. But she didn't really have that intention.
Well, she only bought a one-way ticket.
Yeah. So she got back to Australia and planning to stay. That was what the intention was. So there she is, a single mum then here in Australia, and she got back in touch with her friend who she'd been travelling with. They'd parted ways when, obviously one of them had decided to stay with the lovely man she'd met and pregnant. So they'd split up there. But moving back to Australia, they decided to then move in together and help each other out, especially with Susan having a baby boy, Baby Greg. And so they moved in together I think they'd only just moved into this place maybe 10 weeks prior to
it was about 3 months before the murders,
So by this stage, though, Greg was 16 months old when they moved into the 147 Easey Street.
Yep.
And Collingwood. And look, it wasn't a great area.
Not back in the day.
No.
It's really interesting because nowadays it's gentrified.
Yeah.
It's really expensive to live in Collingwood. But back in the day, so in the 70s, I actually had a bit of a snoop in realestate.com.au to see what the house was worth. In 1975, it was sold for $8,000.
Yep.
In 2017, which was the last sale, the latest sale, it was sold for over $1 million.
Yeah.
It's a tiny, tiny, tiny little workers' cottage.
Yeah.
To give you a bit of an idea of the makeup of it, and this is important to the telling of this story.
Definitely. I'll put a picture of the layout up on our socials when we post this.
Fantastic. Because I think you
helpful.
really need to see it. I know when in researching this, I had to see it to understand how the story was able to play out the way that it did.
Yeah, definitely.
But basically there was a front door and a really, really long hall. Well, not that long. The cottage isn't that big, but a long hallway.
And narrow.
And very narrow. At the end of the hallway, there's a bathroom. So you can, from the front door, you can see straight down the hallway into the bathroom. Then off to the right next to the bathroom was a kitchen, and then in another little nook, a living room. So these are not open plan by any stretch. It's literally a room.
It's a hallway with rooms off it, and then the back of the house.
But the kitchen room and the lounge room was accessed by a little walkway.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go into the
off.
hallway to go from the living room into the kitchen.
Yeah.
However, you did need to go down the hallway to get to the bedrooms, and there were 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
So the bedroom at the front of the house, I believe, was Suzanne Armstrong's.
Yeah.
The middle bedroom belonged to her little baby Greg, and then the next bedroom, which was next to the living room, but you had to go out of the bedroom, down the hallway, into the living room, that belonged to Susan Bartlett.
Yeah.
So it's quite pertinent to the story.
Yeah.
How the layout of the house was. But I think, go and have a look on our socials, because if you can see it, it's much easier to kind of get the concept of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is quite confusing when you hear it, but yeah, when you see the picture to go along with it, it does make it much easier.
Yep.
Yeah. For sure.
So I guess let's kind of get into the story. We know the 2 women were murdered.
Yes.
The way that it all came about and the way that they were discovered is horrific. So the girls, the Suzas, live next door to
Alona Stevens.
Yeah, Alona Stevens and Janet Powell.
Yep.
So Alona, they were, again, as we were saying, 2 single women. Alona was a journalist with the Truth newspaper at the time, and Janet actually managed an Italian restaurant in Carlton, I think with her romantic partner.
Yeah,
but they just didn't
I think
live
that
together.
restaurant's even still running today. Yeah.
I don't know that she'd be
No,
being part of it. So I guess the first thing that kind of, made them think that there was something going on is they found their German Shepherd puppy wandering the streets, thinking, oh, that's a little bit odd. So the puppy's name was Mishka.
Yeah.
And so I find this really funny too. Alona just took the dog and took it into her house. There was a backyard. I don't know why Alona
I think she saw the gate was open so the other part of this house that we should mention is that they shared a wall between Alona Stevens' house and the Suze's house. They had a shared wall, which is not uncommon in that area. But the other side of their house was a laneway. They call it a dunning lane back in the day. And so down that laneway, and then so you could actually access their house from the back of it as well through the gate. So there was this little laneway at the back and down the side. So there was they were on like a corner like that, but it wasn't a street corner. It was a laneway corner basically. Yeah. So I think from all accounts from what I was reading that the gate had been left open and the puppy had been out. And so therefore Alona knew they weren't home because the dog was out. So then she brought the puppy home. I think she was on her way out. So it wasn't like sort of she had time to
think
do much
about
else.
It or worry about it. So she's taken the puppy into her house, and she's gone off to work.
Yeah.
Come home and knocked on the Suze's door.
Yeah.
And there's no answer. So she actually left a note on the door to say, hey, just letting you know, we've got your puppy.
Yeah.
Give us a call or come over and grab it when you get home.
Yeah.
The next morning, Alona goes off to work again. And so by this stage, this is the Wednesday morning. And she's like, oh, the note's still on the door. And that's a bit odd. We've still got the dog hold on. I'm thinking this is the Thursday morning now, isn't
Thursday.
it? Sorry. This is now the 13th.
Yep.
The 13th of January 1977. Sorry,
Yep.
I got my days a bit mixed up. So she's gone, oh, this is really weird. They've still bloody got their dog, and noticed the note was still on the door that she'd put on the day before.
And I think she started to hear, she could hear Gregory crying.
Yeah, she says I've heard her interviewed. So there's a really good long form podcast that Helen Thomas did through Case File Presents called the Easey Street Murders, and she interviews Alona in that podcast.
Yes.
And Alona says, I heard Greg whimpering every now and then, but it wasn't like a big cry, and kids cry, so you kind of just go,
I think the way she even put it was like from the time that she'd spent there, it wasn't that long, it was 10 weeks or so, she was like, she was such a good mum, Susan. She was always attentive to him that, he cried, but never for long. And so she would hear him cry, over those 10 weeks of them living there but it was always taken care of. And so it wasn't like hearing him cry triggered like, what's wrong? Kind of thing. It was always, it would be taken care of, like kind of thing. And so hearing him cry was not unusual. You would just, and then when it didn't go on for long, you just go, it's been dealt with.
You'd easily dismiss
that.
Wouldn't
even think to,
you wouldn't.
No.
But I guess she decided to investigate it a little further.
Yeah.
And she went through the back door, and by all accounts, the front and back doors were both open at the time, like open as in unlocked. And I believe the back door was ajar.
The back door, the back gate was open. The back door was open. The front door, I think, was shut.
But unlocked.
Unlocked, but shut. But so she came in through the back gate, and saw the back door was open, put her head in kind of thing and calling out. No one answering, so kept walking through, realising then, I think she started hearing Gregory cry a little bit more as she walked through, then to kind of keep thinking, I'm going to keep going because no one's answering me, but I can hear the baby. Mm-hmm. There must be someone home, but no one's answering still. And she kept walking through, so obviously that means she's gone through the living room and kitchen and then into the hallway. And she said as soon as she got to that hallway and put her head around the corner, she saw black feet on the ground. And the wording that I saw was that the hallway was awash with blood. Mm-hmm. So she quickly realised that this was not good, and that there was a body in the hallway there. So she came back out. She didn't even go to Greg at this point. I think she put her head in to see Greg, but she didn't pick him up.
I think she actually went down. So I think she walked down to check the body and to make sure that the body, that the person was actually dead.
Yes.
And then in doing that, she's seen the other body and lying on the floor.
Yes.
And then she's walked past. She could tell, obviously, Greg was alive, but she did not want to disturb in all credit to her, she did not touch a thing.
No.
She just called out to Janet to contact the police, and she went and waited in the backyard until the police got there. Her account of it, though, this is really quite concerning. I don't know. Anyway, she says that she thinks they had to call the police twice before they got somebody to attend. Yep. And then the person who attended was a single, young, very early in their career constable.
Which she had to then intervene and stop him from opening the front door because because of where the first body was at the front of the house, opening that door would have potentially disturbed the crime scene. So she's actually quickly thought to even protect the crime scene to that extent and go, well, no, don't go in that way, come around the back. And so then he came in through the back, and once he saw what was there, he immediately called up for more support.
Yeah.
Which to me, I mean, these days, triple O, you call and you get response, I would hope, God.
Yeah.
But I guess they weren't used to these sorts of calls at that. God, you don't want to get used to these things.
No, you wouldn't. But I think what police initially thought, so the investigator, the detective who was called, the homicide detective who was called in on that day, his name was Peter Hiscock, and his colleague Graham McDonald. I haven't heard any interviews with Graham, but Peter's certainly on the record a lot, so you can listen to, again, podcast interviews with him. He pretty much said, we didn't know if we thought we were probably either coming to a murder-suicide or a double suicide type of thing. When you hear two young women, he's like, we didn't really know what we were walking into.
Yeah.
And so maybe that capped the urgency a little bit.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
He certainly didn't give that impression in his interviews that sort of stopped them from being across it all. So Detective Hiscock goes inside and has a look around, and he can obviously immediately see that there's been an absolutely brutal double murder.
Yeah.
It's evident by the fact that he can see that the women have been stabbed, and just the whole scene points to that. So they get the forensic team to come in and comb through everything, and I find what they found is really interesting during that time. They found that the perpetrator of the crime had actually washed himself. We know it's a him because there was seminal fluid found at the scene.
Well, there's question marks on that though.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe there was seminal fluid found.
Oh, that was found, but there was sort of questions over whether or not that was maybe not the perpetrator. The way it was written in the book by Helen as well, she was questioning whether or not that could possibly be someone who'd visited earlier in the night rather than... But there was... this is where I got confused.
I think they found it on the outside of her.
I thought it was under her. Around her.
Yes, they found it around her.
Yeah.
So how did that get on her then if it was before she was murdered?
Yeah, I know. There was something that was like,
Because they pretty conclusively say that she was raped post-mortem.
yeah, and that's what really confused me with then a lot of talk around it, like even that long form podcast you spoke about, and also I know like Andrew Rule's one as well. He questions the semen samples as well as to whether or not the DNA would actually eliminate the actual killer.
Yeah, so I think his questions around the DNA and the seminal fluid is that because has the chain of custody actually been maintained? Because they actually lost the exhibits,
Right. That's
for like tens of years.
Right.
So okay, let's go back a little bit.
Sorry.
So basically, what happened was they found seminal fluid around Armstrong's body, and they forensically concluded that she'd been raped post-mortem. So there was seminal fluid found like within her body as well.
Right.
As well as on the outside. I think what Andrew Rule was saying was, so back in the day, 1977, DNA is not a thing.
No.
But to their credit, they kept samples of everything. They kept samples of hair, blood, tissue, cloth that they found that had, like, they kept squares of carpet.
Yep.
Lots and lots of different exhibits. I think there was something like maybe 22 exhibits that they stored for potential analysis. They didn't even know what could potentially come of this, but was stored for later on down the track.
All they could tell at this point in terms of like they could tell blood groupings, but they couldn't determine person like
Correct.
Yeah, is that what
they
am I right
could
in that?
tell the blood type. So they knew at the scene they found type O and type A blood.
Right.
The most commonly found types of blood. So it doesn't really narrow anybody down.
No.
It could exclude somebody with a B type blood.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
That's about it. Yeah.
So they've collected all these samples and they've been stored at the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine. But those samples were lost for like 20 years or something, or 15 years, I think it was.
Yeah, right.
They went to reanalyze the samples once DNA became more, prevalent.
Yep.
And this case obviously went to the cold case squad headed up by
Ron Iddles.
Ron Iddles. Oh my God, my mum's going to start swooning now that we've mentioned his
Absolutely.
name.
Lynn loves a bit of Ron Iddles.
She does. I mean, who doesn't really? I just love him. But he headed up the cold case squad, and when they were investigating, he was sort of looking through, I think there were like 8,000 or something. Oh, actually, no, sorry. I think there were maybe 200 and something cold cases that they were looking at.
Right.
And they decided that they would reinvestigate this particular case because there were DNA samples to be tested, but they then
Couldn't find them.
But then eventually they became found somehow. And so therefore they haven't had maintained chain of custody. So there's a little bit of like, is this from this scene? How do we even know? I think there's a bit of, messiness around that.
I think in that long form podcast it was mentioned, like, if they did find a match to that DNA and took it to court, it would most likely be thrown out because there would be question marks from the lawyers in terms
absolutely.
of yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
And even like how was it stored? The VIFM for all of these other cold cases, because I kind of went back and had a look to see what other cold cases were sort of being reinvestigated at the time. This was in 2011.
Yeah.
And most of them had been stored at -80 in the appropriate conditions, all catalogued. But these exhibits, for whatever reason, weren't.
Can I ask? I mean, because my limited understanding on this stuff. So DNA, right? Whether it's been like, 'cause I'm walking around every day, like with DNA, carrying it everywhere. Like being stored, what temperature it's stored at, like, does that really have a massive play? Because my understanding is that DNA exists rather, if you...
It's a biological substance, so it does degrade over time.
Okay.
And storing it in a negative 80 degree freezer will preserve it for longer.
Right. So like looking at a sample from back in 1977 today could potentially either just you not find that anything there, or will you find something that might
have been degraded and not to the point where they could conclusively say anything potentially. Okay. I'm not saying that you couldn't get a DNA profile from a sample that was taken in 1977. I'm sure that could happen. But when you're looking at profiling DNA for these types of things, so for identification purposes, they're only looking at certain genes that kind of are unique to an individual. So it's as long as those pieces of DNA on the chromosomes that they're looking at are
there
intact, then they'll be able to find it. But if the sample's degraded enough to where they can't find those markers, then they're not going to be able to process the sample.
But if you find them, you found them. As
yes,
in, like,
absolutely.
if they're there. But if they're not, they're not. Like, it's not it's not sort of like if you look at the profile and go, but it's old, therefore what we're looking at might not be accurate.
No.
It's
no,
like
if your DNA's found, as in if these markers are found, the markers are found.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's what I was like trying to get my brain around when I was listening to all this stuff going, but if it's there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I think that's where the semen that was left in the scene, I think that's where the conjecture comes from.
Right.
Not so much. I mean, look, she may have had a sexual.
This was the theory that I think was being thrown around
night.
That maybe someone had been there.
Is that a story that they're playing into because she's a single woman and she's got a boyfriend and she might have had more than one boyfriend? Like,
yeah.
Let her be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but I think because that was what was being thrown around of like, well, if that was someone from earlier in the night and then someone rocked up and went, wait, you're rooting my girlfriend, and that's when but it just didn't seem to me feasible, but that's what kept sort of being thrown around, which I feel like that's this vibe of this case of like these women were just, they weren't,
like they brought it on themselves or something?
Yeah, they brought it on themselves.
No way.
Yeah, which I felt like there was a vibe of that from people from that era had that vibe of this of like, if they're going to play around, these girls have asked for that, kind of thing, which is just so not what is true of any of this.
Yeah.
Any year or, it doesn't matter what year this case has taken place. There were two women living in a house with a young baby who've been murdered. No more.
Yep.
No more.
Yep. Their background, what they choose to do in their time is not relevant.
Nope.
Well, not really. I mean, I guess in investigating it and coming up with a suspect list, of course that matters. But
whether they had one man coming around to visit them or 10 shouldn't be judged.
Absolutely not, or have any bearing on how the outcome of the case ends.
No.
So on the night of the murder, Susan Bartlett's brother had come over for dinner, and I think they were really close.
They were really close by the sound of things.
that.
Yeah, he was setting up her new hi-fi system.
Stereo,
which
fixing
is really cool.
a speaker or something for it or something like that.
Yeah.
And apparently she was an amazing cook and he loved to come home, go to her place for a home-cooked dinner. So he'd moved down from the country as well.
Yeah.
He had a girlfriend. Apparently, like from his account, they would catch up sort of once a week for dinner.
Yeah.
And he's obviously got a little... oh no, this is Suzanne.
Susan
It's
Bartlett's.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Well,
I know,
anyway,
like you're doing
I know
the
the two Susan names. It's really
That's
really
why
hard
I like
to
to
keep
stick
track
to
of.
Bartlett and Armstrong.
Yeah,
because at least it
then I
kind of
know
keeps
which
it
one's
clear.
which. Okay, let's maybe go with that.
Let's do that.
Yeah. It might make it easier for everyone.
So that was Bartlett's brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's there and he's fixed the thing. They've had a really nice meal. They've watched
Sullivans.
The Sullivans. Did you ever watch The Sullivans?
I think I might have really briefly when I was a little kid and stuff. Yeah.
I think it was a bit before my time, Meg.
Copping it today.
So, and then at about 9:30, he and his girlfriend have gone home.
Yeah. And they were the last people to see them alive.
Yeah. According to him, though, everything was normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Their demeanour was fine. His sister was great.
No mention of, expecting anyone else for the evening. Like there was nothing that was spoken of that would have made him think that was, that someone was expected to be arriving. But at the same time, wasn't spoken about as if there wasn't either. So, but nothing untoward, nothing unusual. Gregory was fast asleep when he left.
Mm-hmm. It was a really, really hot night. It was about 40 degrees that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can imagine like the nights can be absolutely stifling.
Especially in those sort of houses too, trying to get some airflow in those.
Well, that's what makes me think that's why the back door and front door were open, because they were probably trying to get a bit of a cross breeze to go through the house so that it would cool it down a little bit.
Yeah, that sort of speaks to, I guess, in terms of where the murder's happening, of like where they were positioned in the house too, potentially why someone down the back of the house may not have heard something happening at the front of the house as well, if they were outside, say, trying to get a cool breeze before going off to bed or whatever, or out there reading a book rather than sitting in their room reading, because it was a very hot, stifling night. So that's not... I know in the neighbourhood there were people out as well in that back lane. There were people who were sitting in their backyards as well, or sitting at least near doorways and things and did potentially see things because it was so hot they were not in bed yet.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So Greg had been put to bed while the brother was over for dinner. And so he was fast asleep by the time they were watching the Sullivans. And so, once I guess you put an 18-month-old to bed, hopefully they'll be asleep for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of taken care of in that respect. Then we don't know what time. There's certain time points that come to light over the course of the next 2 decades, but the police still don't have a time of death for the 2 women. They know that it happened overnight on the 10th into the 11th of January, so on the Monday night, very early Tuesday morning. And, as I mentioned before, their bodies actually weren't found until the Thursday morning. So what happened in that time?
Yeah,
A lot, it turns
happened.
out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we can start with a little bit of the timeline. First of all, in that evening after 9 p.m. on the Monday night, there's a couple of things that happened that police didn't really follow up very well at the time. So there was a woman in her 70s, Gladys Coventry, who lived across the lane. And so she recalls seeing a man carrying a knife through the street there. There was also another neighbour who, until the early hours of the next morning, recalls hearing, it was sort of like in those early hours of the morning, he recalls hearing a door slam followed by 2 car doors slam and then the sound of a car driving off. So that was I think that was a neighbour actually on Easey Street. So that might have been sort of more on the other side of the house. So
he
saw that.
He was at 139 Easey Street. His name was Peter Sellers.
Yes.
His whole family had lived in Collingwood forever. I think his dad was literally born in that house.
Oh, wow, that's
So
great.
they were Collingwood stalwarts.
Yeah.
He swears to this day there are at least 2 people involved.
Yes.
He, as you said, he heard a door slam followed by 2 car doors in quick succession and then the car speeding off towards Smith Street.
Yeah.
And to this day, he is absolutely adamant that that's what he heard.
Mm-hmm.
He had a friend staying with him that night. So his family had actually gone off to Queensland for a holiday and he was an apprentice jockey. So he decided to stay in Melbourne because there was a race on that he wanted to go to, like a horse race that he wanted to go to. So he hadn't gone on holiday with his family. But because his family were away and he was a young man, he had one of his mates staying over and that mate has actually since passed away. So we can't get his account of what actually happened. But he says, well, according to Peter, his friend, has the same story. And that is that they heard these 3 noises, a door slam and then 2 car doors and then the car screeching away.
Yeah. There was another woman who heard something too.
Yeah.
I haven't got it in my notes what her name was. But she remembered hearing someone walking down the street with, so again, 2 people.
Yep.
And not a conversation, but heard the words, we're going to get those teachers tonight.
Yeah, I think the direct quote from her was, I will kill the 2 teachers tonight.
Yeah, which one of them was a teacher. Bartlett was a teacher. Armstrong was not. She was not working at the time, being a single mum.
Yep.
And looking after her baby. But there was definitely one teacher.
That person's name was Christina Futuris.
That's it.
She was in her 90s by the time she got interviewed. But she basically said, so the detectives never knocked on her door.
No.
She was never formally interviewed at the time.
Yeah.
But she was asked why she didn't then approach the police with this information. And she said, I just thought, she has a very, very, very thick Greek accent.
Yeah.
She goes, I just thought that the police would dismiss me as a crazy Greek lady. But isn't that sad to think that, because she's got an accent, her information's not valuable? Oh, my God.
Yeah.
It's horrible. But why didn't the police knock on her door?
I know.
Why didn't they canvass that entire street and block surrounding it? Like, it blows my mind what wasn't done in the investigation of this, especially back in the day where all they had was door knocking and there was very limited forensics.
That's right.
Everything else was so limited. They didn't have, mobile phones. They didn't have that kind of data.
CCTV. Like, I mean, literally your neighbours are your CCTV. Like, you should be interviewing them to find out these things.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, a lot of these things have come out later and too late. And they talk about the first 24 hours, 48 hours being so vital, and they already lost that time in the fact that the bodies weren't even found until day 3.
Yeah.
So that time after following that finding the bodies is so crucial that they just didn't do that, unfortunately, and dismissed a lot of those things, unfortunately.
I think they dismissed Gladys Coventry's statement, and she had so much to say. This kind of gets me though. So was she the one that when the cops did go back to her and ask her to speak, she went, "Oh, bugger off! Like you've already fobbed me off." That gets me though.
Yeah,
like she's witnessed something in the murder of 2 women.
Yeah.
Put your whatever aside and tell them what you know. Like, even though, okay, yes, you might be pissed off at the police, and fair enough, if they dismissed her the first time and didn't want to hear a full story, shame on them.
Yeah.
But why would she not then go to the police? She had very valuable information that could have changed the course of this case had they known it.
Yeah.
That
bugs me a bit.
That really bugs me.
But I think it's a little bit of a sign of the times too. People were a bit like, you stay out of other people's business.
Sure.
So, I mean, I guess in her mindset it was, well, if you don't want to know, then I don't tell you because, you don't want to know. I shouldn't get involved in other people's business anyway, so I don't speak. I don't know.
Oh, that does not sit comfortably with me.
No, it doesn't help a situation.
No. Peter Sellers, the young apprentice jockey who lived 4 doors down.
Yeah.
He was never interviewed by the police either. So on the day that they discovered that the bodies were discovered, the police did, do a few houses either way.
Yeah.
And they've gone up to Peter's house. By this stage, his family were actually home from their holiday and he was at work.
Yeah.
And they door knocked and, asked a few questions, took a statement according to Peter, they interrogated his family.
Right.
They were asking his sister in particular because she is adamant that the light wasn't on in the house when they got home the night before the bodies were discovered.
Right.
And yet the light was on when the police got there.
Yeah,
but
right.
nobody knows who turned that light on. It could have been anyone.
Yep.
We know 3 people came into that house in that 3 days. We'll get to that in a tick.
Yep.
So nobody knows. But that's what the police were hung up on, was this light being on.
The light, God.
Or whether it was on or not.
Yeah.
But then I think Peter's mum said, "Oh, well, my son was here and he heard this and this and this happened." They were like, "Yep, we'll be back later to take his statement," and they never came back. No.
Jeez.
So in 2017, I think it was the 40-year anniversary, so there was a bit in the media about it.
Yeah.
And that prompted him to contact Crime Stoppers, and they have actually subsequently taken a formal statement from him 40 years later.
Yeah. And your memory's not great. I have heard him speak. I think it was him that he was very adamant about what he remembers, and it's as clear as day to day as it was back then. So all credit to him in that respect. But who's to know that he could have known? It would have been far more useful back then than it is now, in that you could actually follow up potentially. I guess I don't know. What people looked like, what the sounds of their voices, was there an accent, was there not, kind of stuff like that could have been followed up more clearly.
And I think sometimes, especially when something so significant happens and it sticks in your mind, do things get amplified?
Yeah.
Are your memories distorted? Even though it's not like he's deliberately distorting his memory. I fully believe that what he thinks he heard, he thinks he heard.
Yes.
But you don't know how the passage of time has changed that. And we will never know.
Particularly to have his version of events and the friends that were staying there, and to hear that, oh no, but I only heard 1 door. No, I heard 2. You don't know that there might have been some sort of differences that would have made a difference.
Yeah.
To have it now, and as you said, because the friend unfortunately has passed away now, which time happens like that. Now only getting sort of, I don't know, we had the same story. We were both saying the same thing. You've really got to take that on face value and go along with it. But at the time, it could have been very clear. If 2 people are saying this, then we need to follow this up.
Yeah.
It's because we'll get to it. But there was a railway station involved, where the weapon was found and things like that. That you sort of question, well, if they're in a car, how come things are at a train station? I
think it's worth noting now then that the police don't really believe, or they don't put a lot of weight in Peter's account of what happened. I know the lead detectives, in fact, I think the leading theory is that it was a single perpetrator, not more than one person.
Yeah.
And look, to be honest, and with the investigation, all of the looking into it that I've done over the past week, and let's be honest, it's not a deep dive by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it was perpetrated by a single person.
But could there have been a driver?
That's it.
You know?
We don't know.
And you don't know. So that's, I mean, yeah, it's not ruling out that, one person went in, but it doesn't mean there wasn't someone sitting outside waiting for him to come back out and drive off.
I think that I don't think that happened. I think it was a single person who acted alone, but we don't know that. That's just my gut feeling on it after looking very briefly into all of this.
Yeah, but this is the thing where if it was investigated at the time, you could rule out those sorts of things.
That's
and
it.
Now we can't.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So, moving to then the next day. So on the Tuesday, January 11th, we're obviously now, we don't know exactly what time this has occurred of their death, but at this point we assume that they are dead at this point. So over that night, they've passed away. The next day, Barry Woodard, who was seeing Susan Bartlett, so that's the one without the baby, they were dating. They'd been dating for a little while as well. He was a shearer, I believe. So he didn't live locally. He was in and out of Melbourne, going off to work out on farms and things, and coming back to Melbourne for visits. And they'd only recently caught up for lunch or breakfast, I think it was. Then they'd organised to meet again fairly soon after. He was ringing but couldn't get hold of her and wanted to confirm that they were catching up. And because he wasn't able to get hold of her, he went past the house with his brother, I think it was?
With his brother.
With his brother.
Yep.
So the two of them have popped by to see if they could just, have a chat and confirm their arrangements for the next day or so that they were catching up. And so but they've rocked up and there was no answer at the front door. So he's gone around the Dunny Lane and around to the back and seen that the gate's open and that the back door was open. So he has just popped in. And from what he says, he went into where the living room and kitchen was. He has left a note quickly for Susan just to say that he has called by but couldn't find you. He never recalls hearing Gregory whatsoever. No. And he said he left the note and exited.
Went back out the way he came.
So when you look at that floor plan of the house from that picture we'll put on our socials, you'll see what we mean, that he could 100% have done that without seeing anything that's gone on in that house. Gregory crying, he could have been asleep. Don't know.
Yep.
Man. Don't know. But from his account, he did not hear the baby and has walked back out again.
He's a country boy. He's probably being a bit respectful, not wanting to really pry, but he was a bit worried and he didn't know what else to do. He took his brother along with him and his brother waited outside. His brother didn't go inside at all.
They were heavily questioned at the time, obviously, because they being a partner of one of the women, but also that he fessed up that he'd been there. He was the writer of the note. They found the note obviously sitting there and he confessed to being the person who wrote it. Mm-hmm. But that was his story, that on that Tuesday that's what he did. But it didn't spark anything that he felt like he needed to walk any further into the house. And that was that. Barry was Susan Armstrong's boyfriend and he came in on the Wednesday. An unnamed man who was seeing Susan Bartlett did come and visit on the Tuesday.
Yeah, so we don't know the name of this man. He's only known as the tobacco salesman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he climbed through the window. So
they'd only been dating very briefly, these two.
Yeah, and this creeps me out.
Yeah, totally.
They hadn't been dating long, and I don't know that she was all that into it because she hadn't agreed to go. I don't think they had a plan to go on another date or anything. She was just like, call me. Sure. Whatever.
Yeah.
But when he couldn't get in contact with her and, obviously they weren't answering their phone, he decided to go over there and check that he had the right number. So back in the day, the old rotary dial phones you had your phone number written or printed on the inside of the dial. So he wanted to go and check that the number that he had was actually the number. How funny if he didn't, like she'd given him a fake number or something.
But now I'm
He
in the
didn't
house.
know.
Like, what?
Yeah, but knew where she lived.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever. So he's climbed through. So when the women were found, let me just get my notes for this so that I can get it absolutely right. Oh my God, I've got so many notes for this. There's so much going on. So Susan was found face down next to the front door.
Yeah.
Suzanne was in the first bedroom next to the front door, lying face up.
Yeah.
Okay. So Susan's bedroom was actually vacant.
Hang on. Let's try that again. Susan Armstrong is in her bedroom at the front of the house.
Yes.
Face down, right?
Yes.
Suzanne Bartlett, this man's dating currently, her body is at the front door, not in her bedroom. Her body is at the front door.
Mm-hmm.
He knew which room was her bedroom.
Yes.
He climbed through Susan Bartlett's window.
Yes.
She's not in her bedroom, dead. No. She's in the hallway.
Yes.
So he's climbed in through the window, leaving a muddy footprint of sorts on her bed.
Yes.
Then, and I've heard two different versions of this. One, that there was a phone in the room, in her bedroom, which I don't know about. And if that was the case, it's much clearer in terms of like he looked at the phone. So, yep, that's the number I've got. No one else, she's not here, clearly exited out the same way. The other version I believe is more accurate is that the phone was in the kitchen.
Yep.
And he's gone then out of her bedroom. Now, if he had turned one way, he would have towards the front door, he would have seen Susan laying there in this wash of blood that Alona Stevens told us about.
Yep.
Instead, he's turned the other way towards the kitchen.
Yep.
Checked the phone, seen the number's the right number, has then somehow come back the way he came to the hallway and then into her bedroom and out the window without ever seeing his girlfriend laying dead on the floor in a pool of blood.
This is the bit that gets me.
That gets me. So that's his story.
Yep.
And he actually rang the cops. The morning they found the bodies, he presented himself to the police station saying, I was there, this is what I did. He fessed immediately. It wasn't like they had to go finding him. I don't know. But it doesn't all add up to me that he wouldn't.
It doesn't add up to me at all.
No, I don't. And when you see the layout of the house, you'll understand what we mean of like one way or the other. Like coming back the other way, I can sort of somewhat understand if you've walked out, not expecting to see anything, you've walked out and turned the direction you went to go and look at the phone, not seeing her body. I can understand that entirely.
Yep.
But when you've come back to go out the way you came.
Yeah, if he'd gone out the back door, I would 100% be like, oh yeah, I can see how you didn't see them.
Yeah. So... But he didn't. He went back out the way he came.
Yeah, he said he went out out the way he came.
That narrow hallway, how could you have walked with your head purposely not looking where you were going?
Yeah.
In a house that you've potentially not been in before.
Yep.
I think he had because he knew where her bedroom was and stuff.
Yeah.
But even then, it's not your comfort zone. Like to be like walking around without looking where you're going.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't get it. I don't think that's... Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. So that was Tuesday that happened.
Yeah.
On the Wednesday, Barry Woodard appeared, and that's Susan Armstrong's boyfriend.
Yep.
He left the note. And then it was Thursday when Alona Stevens decided that the dog wandering had been at her house the whole time, going, oh, this is not right, and decided to wander over.
Yep.
And that was when she found both their bodies.
Yeah. Now, the police officer who turned up and was waiting for the homicide squad to come, he did something really silly.
Oh, yeah.
He was told to wait outside and to secure the scene, essentially, not let anyone in or out.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He took the newspaper, the day's newspaper, and went and sat on their kitchen table.
Yep.
And then I guess when he heard the homicide squad rocking up, he went, oh, shit, and got himself out of there quick smart. But he left behind the newspaper of the day.
Yeah.
And so that was actually a bit of a red herring for a while because they were like, wow, somebody's had the newspaper, today's newspaper. Yeah. Like, when did this happen? Did this just happen this morning?
Has someone been back to check out their crime scene that they've been, to the point where, because actually reading different places and listening to different podcasts and all those sorts of things, it's interesting how these things grow so quickly. I actually, in a number of places, read that they were newspaper clippings that were left, not a newspaper. And now that's a big difference between that, because that's someone. And then it was like, then there was this whole intricate thing in one article I was reading about, well, what were the topics of the newspaper clippings? Were they hints as to who he could be? Or I'm like, this is all just bullshit.
Yeah, it's all bullshit. So apparently when they were back down at the precinct at Russell Street, they were sort of briefing everybody about it, and this constable had to go, actually,
it's me.
Sorry. It's me. Hi. I'm the problem. And yeah, so anyway, they pretty quickly were able to rule that piece of evidence out. But it just goes to show how easily an investigation can be skewed and why procedures are so important to be followed in situations like this.
I mean, they weren't trained in that aspect of, like, you know, securing scenes. I mean, thank God for Alona Stevens, to be honest. I mean, she was the one who really maintained that scene more than anybody, I think, at that point. Yeah.
She's an amazing woman.
Absolutely.
So the women sustained some absolutely brutal and horrific injuries.
Yep.
I think I've written down here like the
number
amount
of stab wounds. So there's thought that the attack was mainly on Susan Bartlett. So she was the one she was found in her bedroom, and she was obviously raped post-mortem. There were 55 stab wounds in her body. No, sorry, I've got that around the wrong way.
It is around the wrong way. So she had 27.
It was, and so 27 stab wounds, and raped post-mortem.
To 55.
And to then, Susan Armstrong, who was found at the door, had 55 stab wounds and put up a damn good fight from what they could see.
That's it. She had defensive wounds in her arms in particular.
Yes.
She almost made it to the front door. That's horrible.
You could see just the fact of where her body was found. She was clearly trying to scramble to get to that door to get help.
Mm-hmm. So those wounds would have been inflicted on her while she was trying to do that. It's just horrendous. Yeah. When the police were investigating and the forensics team came along, and they noticed that obviously, so the perpetrator had washed themselves in the bath, and so like there's a shower over the bath, and they'd obviously washed, because there would have been a considerable amount of blood on the perpetrator. Yep. They then decided to look into the S-bend of the bath, and they actually found bone fragments of Suzanne Armstrong in there, and they know that they were able to match them up with bone fragments out of her forearms, so they know that they belong to Suzanne. So you can imagine, to have bone fragments that have then been washed off a person and washed off a knife, for that to be found, like that. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, the thought of it. It's just horrific.
And she was fighting that whole time.
Yeah.
Jeez. So the thought is that potentially what has occurred on the night is that they believe Susan Bartlett was in bed reading a book, and possibly then Susan Armstrong was further down the back of the house, maybe potentially with a hot night, maybe she was sitting outside even, and that somebody has come to the front door, potentially then that meaning that Susan Armstrong down the back of the house has not even heard this caller, and maybe even to the point where maybe Susan Bartlett was expecting someone to arrive. So maybe she didn't even need to bother with, you know, listening out for the door or hearing, or even if she did hear the door, not to worry about it because there was someone expected.
Yep.
So this person has come to the front door because there's no sign of like someone trying to break in. So she's put her book down very gently on the bedside table and stood up and walked out to the door potentially and let this person in, whether she's just, I mean, people were not, I mean, I guess as careful as maybe would be these days, and that she might have just immediately opened the door, let alone, you know, not knowing who's on the other side. And this person's found their way into the house and has attacked Susan in her bedroom. Where that started or ended, it's hard to know. But yeah, so the person's attacked them, but it's whatever point then Susan Armstrong has maybe gone, what's that noise, what's going on, and has made her way down. And then this is when she's potentially been attacked and in the hallway there and trying to get to the door to get out, get help. And that's where the bodies have been left and found. So they assume then that the person who attacked them that's why the back gate was left open, is that maybe they've gone out through the back way.
They would have had to, I think, because of the way
the front door was left.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was unlocked, where the body open. I mean, closed. The door was closed but unlocked.
And
but
where the body was, I don't think they could have sort of gotten out.
Yeah,
really without
leaving
blood
like footprints and things there to do. Yeah. So they assume they've gone out the back door and leaving the gate open as well as the back door. So just horrible. And then poor Gregory this whole time, we hope, was asleep. Thankfully, he has apparently grown up to be a very beautiful person. He was raised by his auntie.
In Queensland.
Yeah, so I mean, he's not. I think he's only ever done one interview over the time, which there's not any need for him to really do that, and just feel for him that grown up without his mum, which is really sad. But thankfully, he's young enough to have not had any memory of what's gone on. But yeah, he was dehydrated. He could have died himself just purely from being left for 3 days
in that heat, with no water,
nothing. So he was very dehydrated when they found him, which is why Alona actually, when she saw him, was I'm not going to pick him up because he was so fragile. She didn't want to cause any harm to him, so she wanted medical people to see him before she went touching him. So that just breaks your heart. Horrible.
It is horrible.
Yeah.
So suspects in the case.
Yeah.
So when this was reinvestigated in 2011 by Ron Iddles, they had a list of 35 people, but really 8 strong suspects. And these are the same 8 suspects that were sort of put forward back in 1977. So I suppose there were really 3 that were at the top of that list, and we'll talk about them. So the first suspect was a man by the name of John Grant. Now, he was also a journalist with the Truth newspaper and a friend of Alona Stevens.
Yep.
Then on the night of the murders, he was actually staying at Alona's house. Now, they were not in any kind of a relationship.
No, he was sleeping on the couch.
Yeah, they'd been at work that day, and they went to the pub after work for quite a few drinks from what I can gather. And Alona basically said, come over. I think they had a nightcap or 2 at home at Alona's place. She went to bed in her bedroom. She'd made up the couch for him. She said she heard nothing during the night. So this is another thing, is that neither Alona nor her housemate Janet, neither of them heard anything happen during the night, nor did John.
Yeah. And as we said, they shared
a common
wall. Yeah.
So you would think if anyone was going to hear anything, it would have been them. How 2 women can be brutally murdered and for you not to hear it, I don't get it.
No.
But I fully believe Alona. I believe she didn't hear anything.
Yeah, yeah.
She woke up the next morning before John, and he was still asleep on the couch, and they both woke up with a bit of a sore head, and she drove him back to his place so he could get ready for work the next day.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way that panned out.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about John, and the reason that he was implicated in this, is that he was actually close to a person of interest in the disappearance and presumed murder of an American woman by the name of Julie Garcia Soleil. And she was a 19-year-old, I believe, and they were at a party, and she disappeared from this party, and nobody to this day knows where she is.
Yeah.
What happened to her. Her body's never been found. It's just...
No, but he seems to be the last person to have seen her alive.
Yeah.
Which,
and so for him then to be
of that.
Staying next door on the night that these murders were perpetrated, I get why he was looked at.
And a lot of people would say that the police were very one-minded in terms of him.
Absolutely.
And basically were assuming that he was their guy, which meant that that's maybe why they didn't pay too much attention to these neighbours who were saying quite different stories in it being him. So,
but this is the problem.
Yeah.
They decided before they knew any details, facts, any evidence was, hugely clear that this guy must have done it.
Yeah.
To the exclusion of all others. And this is where the whole case kind of went arse up, because 20 years later when the DNA was tested, he was absolutely found, he was exonerated.
Cleared.
There was absolutely no chance he was involved with this.
Well, if that DNA is the DNA that was at the scene.
I mean, okay, we're assuming that the DNA that was found isn't a match to... Well, it wasn't a match to him, whatever they've tested. Yeah. So he's sort of been cleared. It's an interesting one.
Definitely. I know. So, as we say, we're ruling out people on DNA.
I find it interesting, actually. So Alona Stevens actually says in her account of all of this that she was never asked to provide an alibi for John.
Right.
In her statement. I mean, she did. But she was never asked. That was never something, even throughout the inquest, I don't think that she was asked,
Right.
which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, then they thought they had their guy. They didn't want things to not marry up for them, I guess.
Yep.
Interesting.
The next suspect is the tobacco salesman.
Yep.
He's my front runner.
Yeah, mine too. But again, cleared with DNA.
Yep. The thing that I can't get my head around is
They let him leave the country too.
They did. He went to England, was
Yeah,
it?
I think so. When
Yeah.
for the first inquest, the
Yeah.
inquest that occurred, that he was not even in the country.
So and they allowed him to. Like, he asked whether he could go.
Yeah.
So they obviously didn't think he was in. The thing that I can't get my head around is that he didn't see the body at the front door.
Yeah.
That is so implausible to me. It does not sit right with
If he
me.
didn't do it, I believe he saw the body and just didn't want to get involved.
Okay.
Like,
But
I mean, I don't know how that could be,
that
but
goes against any human instinct.
yeah. And
To
the fact
see
that he
somebody
then
like
owned
that
up the
not
next
do
day.
anything.
Yeah.
Look, that's what the police, I think that's the part that the police take as him being not implicated in all of this back in the day anyway, was the fact that the next morning he was like, oh, I was there last night or the night before, whatever. I can't remember what day it was.
Yeah.
But could he have just been like doing that as a ploy?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I don't know that we'll ever know.
No.
The other main suspect was an ex-police officer who, now he was never convicted, I don't think, of raping women, but
was
he'd
well
been
known and
involved.
linked to
he
those
was
sorts of
known
things, though.
exactly, but
He was,
I think
he
because
was not in the police force anymore because of it.
Yeah,
Like,
no, that's what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
think instead of like prosecuting him for his crimes, they were just like, yeah, don't be a police officer.
just move
anymore.
on.
Move on.
God.
That would never happen these days.
What, wouldn't it? Sure, in the boys' club it does.
I would bloody well hope not. So he was actually, because he'd been forced to leave the police force, he was working as a roof plumber.
Yes.
And he was working on Easey Street in that week.
Yeah, during that time.
Yeah.
And I mean, the two women, very attractive young women. And there was a thought that, maybe he had just seen them around and sort of stalked them a little bit and,
kind of went, oh, yeah.
oh, yeah, I'll piece that. Yeah. Interesting.
Very.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were the three main persons of interest.
Yep.
The crime remains unsolved to this day.
Yep.
There has been talk of whether another inquest is required. So the inquest that was originally done was inconclusive. So basically all it concluded was that the women were stabbed by a person or persons unknown. The inquest was held before a lot of the evidence has come to light, and
Yep.
I know a lot of the evidence is anecdotal. It's witness testimony. There are people who've actually since passed away, so we only have written statements from. But I think there's enough information there to warrant another inquest.
Further investigate
and
this.
exactly.
Yeah. Because there are two.
And if
little
Ron
bits-
Iddles thinks it can be solved, then my golly gosh, it can be solved. What does he say? It's
he
like
always-
it's always in the file.
There's two bits of evidence that we haven't talked about that were found.
yep.
One being the knife, the weapon.
Sorry, yes,
So
absolutely.
that was found at Victoria Park Railway Station.
Mm-hmm.
It was tested and believed to be the weapon. So it matched up very well. The other bit of evidence that was found was a face washer, and I actually read a shawl as well, potentially.
I don't know that they've concluded that the shawl was actually involved.
Yeah,
in any
it's
way.
mentioned in some places, in some places
Yeah.
it's not. So there was definitely a face washer, though, was with blood all on it, was found a couple of blocks away. So, and it's been kept, but I guess at the time they probably couldn't have proved that the two were, part and part of the same thing. But I don't know if now DNA testing can prove that or not as well. But it was definitely kept, and that was to look at further down the track when the science maybe helped. But so yeah, and then we're left with then the semen, and DNA evidence that's got a bit of question mark over it. But that's all we're kind of left with. Other than, using the DNA, we can look at, like we talked about with the GSK with Golden State Killer, and using familial DNA. And because obviously this person, the DNA from that sample never showed up in any of the databases. So basically what that says is that even if a solved or unsolved case, this person has not perpetrated any other crimes that they have on the system. So that which such a horrific incident, you would think that this person is someone who would do that again, or at least
that's what makes me think that this was a personal thing. So
Yes.
that makes me think that it is somebody known to one or both of the women in some way.
Yeah, that, or, you know, and the other thought was that if it's someone who died not long after,
Or went to prison not long after.
well, if they went to prison though, they'd have their DNA.
Would they?
Would they? I don't know. Is
So
that something
there
that's-
was a suggestion that so this account came from Mark Chopper Reed. So we'll have to do him one day as an
God,
episode
yes.
too.
Love that.
But he was in prison with a man. Now I can't remember the man's name. He was a terrible crook, and he'd done some really horrible things to people. He was actually arrested, I think it was like a day or two after the bodies were found, for another crime.
Right, okay.
And so, and I don't think DNA back in 1977, I don't think they took DNA samples from prisoners, and this person is still in prison to this day. So, and Chopper Reed reckons this guy confessed to the murders.
Yeah, which I mean, it's not unheard of that they'll confess to.
And also he
Just, you know,
confessed to other
take credit
things
for
that
things
he
or whatever.
apparently hadn't done.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
you know, it is what it is, but it may warrant
check.
some
What?
checking.
I mean, to me, I think you lose all your rights like that sort of stuff, don't you? Once you go to prison, surely they can just start taking samples.
I still don't think, I think they still have rights.
Do they? So, like,
I mean,
that's the
should
whole
they,
ethical
should
conversation
they or
we can have,
shouldn't they is a different story, but I think they actually do.
They do, but whether they shouldn't.
Yeah.
To me, that sort of thing. I don't know. I chop and change my thoughts on DNA, and, you know, like, not necessarily. I know Ancestry.com don't do this. Like the police can't access necessarily their databases of information, but I mean, because I don't do crime, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, have my
Yeah, go
DNA.
for
Like,
it.
go for
Yeah.
it, check it out. But and which it could only take a family member of this person to do that and put their DNA out there in a database, and they could figure out then who it is that's potentially.
if they submitted the right piece of evidence, that DNA from the right piece of evidence to that.
Yeah.
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 I mean, that's a long shot.
Yeah, but it's a lot of work, but it can be done. It's,
Yeah, absolutely.
Golden
Yeah.
State Killers, how that sort of
Yeah,
was
exactly.
solved. Yeah,
That's it. That one was a really lucky get.
Yeah.
But that proves that it
it
can
can
happen.
be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, it's a whole ethical conversation as to whether or not that's
For sure.
the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, very interesting.
God, yeah.
On the 15th of January in 2017, a $1 million reward was offered by Victoria Police for anybody who has any information that will lead to an arrest in this case.
Yeah.
So if anybody does know, contact
Yes.
Crime Stoppers, and that $1
taking
million
that million.
reward is still up for grabs for anybody who is
Yep.
able to assist the police in that way. So just really quickly to sort of reference who we, where we took some material from this week.
Yep.
For me, it was like the Helen Thomas, her book and her long form podcast, the
Yep.
Easey Street Murders. Her book is called Murder on Easey Street. You can get it on Amazon. And then Andrew Rule, I just love him. He's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
His podcast is called Life and Crimes,
Mm-hmm.
and the episode pertaining to this case is called The Horror at Easey Street. So
there's another one he did with Helen as well, where he interviews her a bit further into some of her research as well.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah,
Definitely worth a
definitely.
listen if you want more information and more depth into all of it.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much for listening to another episode of Two Crime Besties. As we always say, please hit the subscribe button on whatever podcasting app you're listening to, because that really helps us get the podcast out to other people.
Yep.
Come and join us over on TikTok, because we're going to get some posts going viral. We're going to try and do some cool green screen stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And see how we go. Next week, tune in for the Boston Strangler. I'm actually really looking forward to researching this one, because
Me too.
it's one of the ones. It's one of the first. In fact, it's the first one that we're doing that I don't have much background knowledge on.
Yep.
So it'll be good.
Cool. You'll be back in my seat, where I sometimes just go, "What am I talking about?"
Where are we at? Sorry. All right. Have an amazing week, everybody.
For sure. See you back here next week, everyone. Stay curious, crime besties.